There's a great feeling I get every time I rewatch Death Note. I remember being 15 and being introduced to it by my best friend, and then reading the synopsis and just thinking how cool and different it was. A note where if you wrote down someone's name, they die, was something that was completely out of my imagination at the time. Recently, I came across Death Note on Netflix, and the nostalgia started pouring in. I quickly remembered what it did for me when I was 15 and how Light Yagami was such an important influence in molding me into the man I am today. I know that sounds like a crazy statement, and you're probably thinking, what? A murderer made you into the man you are today? Kinda. Let me explain why. Light Yagami is one of my favorite characters of all time across any spectrum of media, because of how he saw justice in the grand scheme of things. I was 15 when I first watched Death Note, and that was the age where I was still forming my identity, still trying to figure out who I was and who I truly wanted to be, what kind of man I wanted to be in 10, 20, 30 years' time, and most importantly, what kind of morals I wanted to hold. What is good and what is bad? Should people die for the evil crimes that they commit? These were questions I found myself asking every day in my early teenage years. So watching Death Note and discovering the complex character of Yagami Light was a perfect timing for me. The story of Death Note is as simple as making apple pie. The main protagonist, Yagami Light, stumbles upon a notebook that kills anyone with a heart attack if you write their name inside it. Now, who did he decide to kill? Yagami at first decided to kill people who committed crimes. No one was spared. Criminals, repeated offenders, thieves, murderers, and others all felt the wrath of Light. He would be the judge, jury, and executioner of all wrongdoers. And at first, Light's method of killing bad people did not mesh well with me at all. Now, growing up in a Christian household, I was always told this: killing was a sin, and that act should never ever be performed no matter what the bad guy did. If he or she killed someone, that did not mean that he or she should be killed as a response. They should be punished, of course, but not killed. Retribution was never the answer. I had been taught that since I was a toddler, and that became a part of my principles in the early stages of my life. Because of what I was taught, I hated Light at first, angry and annoyed that he proclaimed himself as a god of the new world, committing sin and abomination. My mother always used to tell me this: no one has a right to kill, and everybody has a right to live, no matter what they've done. But little did I know that after every single minute I watched Death Note, I began questioning my own morality. I found myself picking apart and questioning everything my parents taught me about the sanctity of life when the disappearance of Madeleine McCann happened in 2007, which is exactly the same time I was watching Death Note. A young child snatched away and still to this day not found, dead? Sadly, more than likely. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann was my awakening as to how cruel and evil the world we're living in is. I remember being filled with anger, so much anger and hurt, that this little person with so much life ahead was snatched away. I began thinking, what if that was my cousin, a friend's child? What if that hit closer to home? Would I not want the worst to happen to the perpetrator? And what's the worst that could happen to a murderer? For he or she to be killed for their crimes. But that went against everything I was taught. There were days after I watched an episode of Death Note where I would lay in my bed in deep thoughts, thinking and arguing with myself if Light was truly right in doing what he did. An internal war broke out in my mind as I desperately tried to find the answers to my questions. If I took the side of Light, I was going against the teachings and words of my parents and supporting Light's view of the world and its actions. If I took the side of my parents, I was effectively accepting that those who kill people should not be killed. Which do I choose? I truly understand that Light went off the deep end and started killing anyone that came in his way, including innocent people. He even mentioned killing lazy people too down the line. However, for the purposes of this video, I want to ignore this aspect of Light and focus on the Light of the old, where he solely killed criminals and those on death row. At the age of 15, I found myself doing the unthinkable and leaning towards Light's eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth philosophy. But that was too big of a decision for me to make at such a young age. And who better than to consult than my parents? One day after school, I asked my parents this: if the Madeleine McCann situation were to happen to a family friend of ours and she was found murdered, should the murderer be killed for his or her crimes? Now, Madeleine McCann has not been found murdered. I just asked that question hypothetically speaking. There was a very, very long drawn silence, and I didn't know whether the cause of it was because they were shocked that I asked such a question, or they actually agreed with me, but verbally didn't say so because doing so would crush their moral world they've spent years indoctrinating me in. Till this day, I've still not received an answer from my parents in regards to that question. I went from despising Light to essentially aligning to his cause, so much so that I started questioning my own morality, but at the same time reforming it, all because of Light. I admit that I still can't finally decide. Some days I feel those who kill should be killed, but on other days I walk back on that statement as my religious upbringing simply opposes it. Nonetheless, what Light Yagami has done for me was question my own beliefs, what I've been taught, and what I truly want to believe in. Light wasn't perfect, and I'm not either. But I do understand one thing: morality and justice are simply subjective rather than objective. And that's something my parents never taught me. Light's view of morality and justice was subjective. And are we right to say that he was wrong, or even right for that matter? That's simply for you to decide.